Hey, it's Neil. I am beyond excited to share beer stories, hosted by my good friends Mischa Smith and Alex Violet from Pasteur Street Brewing Company, and produced by me at 7 Million Bike Podcasts. This is a combination of two major passions for me, podcasting and craft beer. I cannot thank Alex and Mischa enough for putting their trust, faith, and patience in me to get this off the ground, and I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as we did making it. And of course, as always, a massive, massive, massive thank you to Lewis Wright for all of his support for what I do. So check out Beer Stories here on a Vietnam podcast. It's going to be a special PodSwap, and we're going to do more of these over the coming months. There will be new episodes every week. This is for beer enthusiasts, not beer snobs. So if you love beer, you'll love this podcast. The link is in the show notes. Go and follow that if you need it, and enjoy the podcast. Cheers.
Welcome to Beer Stories. It's an ongoing podcast about beers. Our producer is Neil Mackay of 7 Million Bikes Podcast. Our theme song was composed and performed by Lewis Wright. My name is Mischa Smith. My co-host to my left, as always, is Alex Violet.
Hi, everyone.
And our guest today is the CEO of Beervana Vietnam, the founder, CEO, and brewmaster of MixTape Drinks. And just like Sheryl Crow, he likes a good beer buzz early in the morning, Mr. Chad Mitchell.
What's up? There's so many IPAs I hate, and there's so many IPAs I love. Like the first craft beer that got me excited about beer in general, because I always say I hate beer. And then the first time I ever had an IPA, I spit it out. For a long time, I was a double IPA drinker. I was that guy. And when I want a double IPA, I want a double IPA. I want something big, bold, monstrous, hop overload, burns your tongues with the amount of hop. One of the ones I found in Texas that was doing something wildly different. They've done ranch flavored beer, buffalo sauce flavored beer.
Is there a beer style that you really, really love to make that's not like your favorite to drink?
Hefeweizen.
How you doing, bud?
Sheryl Crow?
I didn't have that written down.
Okay.
It literally occurred to me just before you got here.
Okay. I'm glad I remind you of Sheryl Crow.
I like a good beer buzz early in the morning. It was the lyric more than the
Okay,
the
I got that.
Right. We're going to talk about beer styles because I know you have a lot of thoughts on the subject. Before we get into it, we're going to do our the hottest new running segment in the podcast business. That's called the Hangover Check.
Okay.
Today is Sunday. We're recording on a Sunday. Chad, how hungover were you this morning?
Barely. Shockingly. I was out drinking till about 2 something, but I didn't have a hangover this morning.
Drinking beer or spirits?
A little bit of both. Some
Love
shots, too. I even had a balut quail egg shot last night, which my first time I had balut. And that was how I started the night off.
Can you tell our listeners outside of Vietnam what balut is and why it's fucking weird that you were shooting it last night?
Well, yeah, it's like a slightly embryonic egg. Is it pickled? I'm not sure it's pickled how they prepare it. I just know that it's like not fully developed, and so a bit of bones in there, little soft feathers. It's a little weird, but I enjoyed it.
Apparently, also a cure for hangovers.
So maybe that's why I don't have a hangover today. I beat the curve. I started with that and then came back around.
I used to just like grab a nice bowl of pho ba on the way home to prevent my hangovers.
Yeah, not unripened eggs. Not fully developed eggs. Luckily, it was a quail one, so it was really small. So I was dabbling.
Embryos.
Yeah, embryos.
Yeah, I avoid the embryos when I can.
I have the thing, though. I'll try any food at least once, and preferably twice.
Right.
Learned that for Anthony Bourdain. He's to try everything twice. First time, shock value, blah, blah, blah. Second time, you learn a bit. So I got to do it again. So
rest in peace, Anthony Bourdain.
100%.
Alex?
6.1.
Okay.
Oh, that's a specific number.
He's very specific. No rookie scores. And yeah, I didn't really have a hangover today. I was saying to you guys, I had a big Friday night. So Saturday, I went home early, relaxed. I wanted to be sharp for the recording today. All right, so that's great. Let's get into it. Like I said, we're going to talk about beer styles.
Yeah.
So again, just to set it up, I introduced you. Obviously, Chad, you're a brewer, as well as working in the beer business for a long time, and I know you have a lot of thoughts about beer styles.
Yeah.
So, do beer styles even matter anymore?
I think they do. I mean, I think the beer styles are important to know. It's like knowing the fundamentals of cooking and the fundamentals of anything. Like, you got to know the basics. You got to understand the science of it. But I think now it's kind of like, have fun. Not everything has to be categorized. I have a huge problem with categorization in general. Even in science, I'm kind of like, why do we have to put everything in boxes? Like, why does it have to be so specific, you know?
I think that's what we really want to talk about today.
Yeah. So like, I mean, the duck-billed platypus, whatever, like, they're like, it's two things. So I'm like, okay, this is why categories don't always work. So beer, especially, I'm like, why are we forcing ourselves into these boxes? Like, just have fun.
Right. So to your point, it's important that you learn and know the rules before you can start to break them.
Absolutely. Or at least along the way. You don't have to know them before. Break all the rules you want, figure it out, but then have some knowledge when you're speaking to other people about any topic. You're going to be in a group of people that, you know, around beer guys, and you're like, oh, I just wing it. Like, okay, well, do you know anything about what kind of beer you're making? Like, did you throw salt in there? What's your deal? You know, I think it's important to like at least have an understanding so you can communicate intelligently once in a while.
Right. There's a meme going around right now with Walter White and Jesse Pinkman.
Okay.
When they first met. Jesse's, oh, the shit I cook is the bomb. The shit you cook is shit.
Exactly.
Sorry, Alex, did you want to jump in there?
No.
Okay.
But yes, to your point, I mean, I always like, when I make beer, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I generally start with like, okay, a Pale base or something, and then just have fun with it after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of goes a different direction, and I'm like, I guess it fits here. And then I just keep, all the beers I'm making now are like, I try to put some like new style that no one's ever heard of. I just make up some, like, oh, this is a new style. I call it like a New World Pale Ale or something. Like, what? That's not a thing. I'm like, I thought you said it was New England. I'm like, never said that.
Right. I like that. I like the idea of that. It was like, just put a few words together.
Exactly.
Like, I invented this beer style.
Exactly. And then once it takes off, you're like, that was all me.
Yeah. From the brewer's perspective, it gets pretty exhausting. Like, you know, first off, you're not just going to brew and change your recipes based off like what somebody wrote in a book like 20 years ago about what the flavor should be. You're going to brew the things that people want to drink and be creative. And it's kind of annoying that you have to put that into a box. But then I was also thinking of the other side of it, like being a customer of beer and then having like a style, like if it's, you like this certain type of flavor, it helps you decide what you might want to try next. So I think that's where it gets tricky for me. It's like you want to clearly communicate and like set the expectation of what you're going to get. But at the same time, it's like, almost, it kind of hurts. I don't know. I don't even know how to finish that. Maybe you could finish it.
It hurts creativity?
I don't know. Like, it makes you feel like you have to brew things of a certain style and make it taste the same because that's what people are expecting. So it's like, I don't think it'd be good to just be like, every beer is like, I don't know, just try it, man.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like you need to communicate more about what it's going to be than when you start like defining the styles. But then that definition can then like change the way people brew beer, and then it's kind of like a negative.
Well, it's like when people say, "Why are there so many IPAs in craft beer?" I'm like, that's like saying, "Why is there so much rock music in music?" I mean, rock is a very broad category. IPAs are now a very, very, very broad category. They're still the best-selling categories because people tend to go hate them or love them, but generally, the majority of craft beer drinkers kind of lean towards IPAs. Oh, I'll have the IPA. They go there for that, whatever that might be, that imaginative, creative style started out as, and it's gone wildly all over the place. But people are like, oh, but there's only IPAs. But I'm like, each one of those IPAs is nothing like the rest of them. You know, like if you compare Peaches and Cream and Jasmine, two wildly different beers, but they're both IPAs. Like, you know, so it's like, that's what I think of styles. I'm like, okay, good. We're in the general category of rock. But some people might say, oh, I hate rock music. Like, well, but if you look at what rock categories in Spotify, I mean, it's got everything from Britney Spears to friggin', you know, Metallica. Like, you know, I mean, Britney Spears falls more in pop, but she's been classified as rock in certain categories. No, that's not rock, but, you know.
We'll be right back.
Join pilot and adventurer Fernando Pino as he takes you on journeys to discover exciting destinations across the UK and Europe. You'll fly with him to hidden gems and experience local culture, from bustling streets to serene hideaways and the best places to eat, sleep, and play. Travel Plans is more than a podcast. It's your ticket to exploring the world and its history with a friend. In this episode, we are flying to discover a beachside paradise perfect for the whole family. Discover golden sands, activities galore, and even free childcare so you get your own break too. Why am I still here?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Are you personally a fan of IPA? Is that like one of your favorite styles?
See, I don't know. That's, again, there's so many IPAs I hate and so many IPAs I love. Like the first craft beer that got me excited about beer in general, because I always say I hate beer. Like I hated lagers. I hated it so much. And then the first time I ever had an IPA, I spit it out. I said, what the fuck is up with that? I poured it out. It's terrible. But then the first craft beer I actually really started enjoying was Blind Pig. And that's an IPA-ish from Russian River. And I was like, okay, this beer is awesome. So yes and no. We're not going to get any definitive answers on this podcast at all today.
So that's interesting to me that you said that your first IPA you ever had you just didn't like. Because I'm trying to think back to like I remember the first time I ever had a Guinness, and I was just too young and I wasn't ready for it. I was like, oh, it's thick and heavy and now like I could crush 10 Guinnesses in a sitting. Like I love that beer. So there are some styles I think that you have to get just inclined to and get used to by having it more than once and easing in. But yeah, and I think you is a bit of an understatement to say that most craft beer drinkers lean towards IPA.
I mean, as far as sales numbers go, like tends like IPAs to be the best selling of the category.
I'm saying more than kind of like, at least here in Vietnam, like IPA sales are still massive compared to any other style.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
One of the ones I wanted to bring up is a double IPA.
Mm.
So I've seen double IPAs that are lower in alcohol than our flagship regular single IPA. Like, does that bother you when you see that? Do you like? Because I don't understand. I don't understand the psychology of it. I don't understand the marketing. Like, if you had some massive style that's like really popular, and you're like, oh, I'll just call it that. That's fine. But like, IPAs tend to sell better than double IPAs, I think. Still, so like, what's the thinking? Like, what? Where are we going with this?
I don't know. Okay, so double IPAs were for a long time. I was a double IPA drinker. I was that guy. Like,
sure.
I only drink double IPAs. So.
Yeah.
And when I want a double IPA, I want a double IPA. I want something big, bold, monstrous, hop overload, burns your tongues with the amount of hops on scalds your tongue.
Yeah.
But
when you're in that mood, that's what you want.
Yeah. So I think part of me would be annoyed. Like if I was like double IPA and it was like 6.2%, I'd be like, I don't get it, But it would annoy me because I feel like I'm getting gypped. I mean, it's an American thing, right? You're always like, oh, I got to get our value for our money. So I feel like double IPA, I'm not going to pay that much for that,
Sure. Just real quick before we move on from that, just want to state for the record that we are not prejudiced against gypsies on beer stories.
Gypsies?
Gypped, he said.
Oh, gypped. Oh, yeah. Is that a bad word now?
It's a racial slur. Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Obviously, everyone appreciates value for money. I'm just saying it's not a good word. Gypped.
No, didn't know that.
No.
There's something new every day.
There's just no, leave it in.
Did you know that?
Because
did you know that, Alex?
As soon as Mischa started saying something, I was like, "Oh, that's probably gypsy." I never thought about that.
Either, yeah.
But I also don't say that. I never say
who's standing up for the gypsies these days? They're underrepresented in culture.
I hope all this is getting deleted.
But back to the beer stuff, though.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
No, I'm thinking about what you said, and it's like I'm disappointed if I get a double IPA and it's not at your perceived threshold, and then you can go and there's like a style guideline that says it has to be like this amount. But I remember a specific time where the pale ale wasn't selling very well, and we're like, oh, okay, maybe we'll change the recipe, and somebody just chimed in and says, why don't we just call it a session IPA? If you put IPA on it, it'll sell really well. And they were right.
They were right. Okay,
they're
see,
right.
that's why I think why they see IPA on so many beers, because at the end of the day, it does sell better. But then people complain, oh, I don't want all these IPAs on the board. I'm like, at the end of the day, people go for those beers,
Sometimes I personally like have a hard time. Like, would you call this a session IPA, a pale ale, an IPA? Yeah. They're all very similar. Sometimes there's a lot of overlap.
Exactly. It's all marketing.
I actually heard of a competition. I'm bummed I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was I believe based in Canada, and you would just send beers without anything said about them. And in the first round, all of the judges would taste the beers and say, this is this category. Yeah. This is that category. You didn't get to choose. The judges would say, hey, this is what category it is. This is a double IPA. You're going to be judged as a double IPA.
Did they then go back and compare to what the brewers had called it and said, oh, wow, we were way off. That's not that at all. Or
I'm not sure.
That'd be cool.
I just heard about it. And then I guess, went on living my life. I forgot, like, hey, maybe I should send beers there. I probably should have. But I thought it was an interesting concept that instead of picking a category, because that was always so tough when I was sending beer to a competition. Like, should you put it in the cream ale, or is it actually blonde, or would it categorize better as this? And maybe this category, it's going to have 400 entries, and this other one will only have 30. And there's like a whole like almost science to like going through and picking the categories. And I was like, man, it'd be really nice to not have to do that.
Okay, so that was the thing that gave me a lot of consternation recently. I was submitting my beer for the Seabrew Awards next week, and I was sending them over. Well, 2 years ago, I sent Peaches and Cream, which is, it's not really New England, not really an IPA. It's right in between. And I put in the New England category, and I got reamed on the things like, this isn't hazy enough. This isn't this. This isn't this. And I was like, that sucks, because now I'm like, so this year I was like super stressed about it, because I put all 3 of my beers, and all 3 don't really fit perfectly a category, except for maybe Molly, but the rest of them not much. And so I was sitting there like really stressed about it. I'm like, I don't know what to do about this. I'm like going to screw myself, so yeah.
So, yeah, I felt the same thing many times. I think this year I was going to register, and we have an amber ale. And then there just wasn't a category for amber ales. I was like, should I like put it into something else? And I can't remember. I think I ended up just not entering it. I was like, this is too hard.
Too much anxiety.
Just as a casual beer nerd, as I'm sure a lot of our listeners are, like, can you guys talk a little bit about that from a brewery's perspective? Like, what's the difference between a pale ale and a session IPA? What's the difference between an IPA and a hazy IPA, or a New England IPA? Like, what you said, they're pretty similar, but like obviously they're different beers. How do you differentiate a session IPA from an American pale ale?
I think Chad was talking about this a little bit earlier when you were saying Blind Pig. Like IPA. Yeah. But it's technically called a pale ale, right?
Yeah, I think so.
But it's very hoppy beer. Like, was it right around 6% alcohol?
6.8, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. If that beer was sitting in front of me, I'd be like, probably IPA. Or depending on the day, I might call it a pale ale.
Okay, but so forget about other people's beers. From a production perspective, from you guys going into the brewery, I'm going to make a pale ale today, or I'm going to make a session IPA today. What's the difference?
There are specific guidelines. There are specific rules down to ABV, hop character, or IBUs, everything else. But man, I don't know. I mean, those do exist. That's why they are various, and they keep having to add to the categories. So all these new craft beers come out, like, and sub-defining new styles.
Do you know the guidelines of the styles, Mischa?
I'm familiar with
that they exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they might just matter to brewers.
But you guys are both brewers, and you're saying they don't really matter. Are you not?
I think same thing as like I said earlier, is like, it's important to understand them and know them, or at least a decent amount of knowledge about your craft. Whatever it is. You're a painter, you have to know, but you have to know some of the definitions. If you're a chef, you need to know, some like the French styles, the Italian styles. But then do whatever you want, but you don't have to be an expert at it. I've known chefs who are amazing chefs, so the best chefs in the world, who don't necessarily know the molecular science behind what they're doing. But I know chefs who do.
I feel like when you brew what you want to brew, and then you try and pick the style that you think it fits into the most to call it that. So that way it's like fair to somebody who could potentially buy it. Right. Like you brew what you want and you get the flavors out there, and then kind of look at the different styles and say like, hey, this flavor of beer, if I call it a pale ale, they're going to get what they're expecting when they say pale ale. But then there's some that are just like so minute little differences that I don't think it really matters. It's more marketing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. So I think it's more marketing than anything else. But if you're going back to your first question, like you're saying also, like, when you go into brew, what are we thinking? I think there it's like, usually I know like, okay, I'm going to brew a stout. I know like kind of the direction I'm going to go. But if I'm doing an IPA, I know a general direction I'm going, It's okay, I'm going to cook, a hamburger. I'm not going to cook a taco, kind of the direction you're going, you know what I mean? Like I think that's where it's helpful. Like, I know today I'm going to brew something along these lines, but I want to do some other stuff.
That makes total sense. You go in and say, hey, I want like a dark beer or something like a stout. And then you start making your recipe. What about this? Yeah. This would taste really good. And at no point you say that's going to make it outside the style guidelines. So we're not going to do that. You start with an idea. Yeah. And then as that idea develops, you let it develop. And then at the end, you recategorize it if you need to. Mm-hmm. Like, this turned into a double IPA when I went in to brew an IPA. Let's call it that.
That makes sense to me. Mm. If you at the end of the process, you're like, oh, this is a little more hoppy and a little higher alcohol than I was going for, or than I was expecting, or like than I initially intended. So yeah, this is a double IPA, not a regular standard IPA. But you're saying you could go in and brew a beer and be like, is that a pale ale or is that a session IPA? I don't know. I'll just taste it when it's done, and then whichever is that.
I'm talking about designing recipe.
Yeah.
Not you brew a beer and most brewers out there, you know what the beer is going to taste
I
like.
would hope so. You guys are kind of leading me down a different path here. No, okay.
It's not what you don't know what's going to come out. It's like you start designing a recipe and then you're like, what about a little bit of this and then a little bit of that? And then before you know it, you're outside of the style guidelines.
Okay.
So then at that point, you just say like, oh, okay, we're actually brewing a double IPA now because I was playing around with all these different hops and like, man, it's a massive amount of hops. And then we, added some more malt background to like keep that in check. And now it's 8% and massively dry hop. So it'd be, on that line, 8%. Is that a double IPA to you, Chad? I don't know the style off the guidelines off the top.
Plus, I'm cool with. I think it's a 8.1 or no, 7.7 to 9 something. I think it's double IPA.
Okay.
Somewhere there. Can't remember.
So thank you. That's a satisfying answer to that question.
Yeah.
You still didn't answer my first question. What's the difference between a pale ale and a session IPA?
Ooh. There are specific guidelines. I can't recall them off the top of my head, but
okay, but it's the ABV.
Yep.
It's
IBUs.
The amount of style or hops that you would use, or is that not?
I would say that for me, a session IPA, less alcohol than an IPA.
Yeah.
But the same assertiveness of the hop.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a pale ale is a lot of times less alcohol than an IPA, but it's also less assertively hopped.
Right.
So if you have a very like assertively hopped pale ale, maybe, and it was in the lower alcohol range. But I don't know these guidelines off. I have to look them up every time
I'm not asking for specific numbers. I get that. But that explanation also makes sense to me. Because when I'm doing beer training and I describe a pale ale, I say it's like an IPA, but it's less bitter, less assertive on the hops, lower alcohol. So then if you're saying the difference between a session IPA there is that it is less alcohol as well, but the hop profile is still assertive enough to be called an IPA, just session, lower alcohol. Yeah. That makes sense to me.
But then again, I mean, like you said, like that, if you have a palate that's more hoppy, then it comes down to a fine line of, okay, this could be either direction. It's pretty hoppy, but is it hoppy enough to be an IPA? That's where people say, okay, it's a marketing decision at that point. Which one's going to sell better?
Sure. I get that as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right. I think we landed on an answer that I'm satisfied with. I hope our listeners are as well.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're complete.
Neil, how do you feel about that? Okay, we got the thumbs up from our producer, Neil.
It's very tricky because the guidelines, like I said, I don't know them off the top of my head, but you might be talking about like a 0.5% alcohol difference that would separate between like session IPA and the lower end of a pale ale.
Sure, and when it comes to that, splitting hairs about that, I think is kind of silly, frankly. So I get that. Like if it's on the borderline, then yeah, call it whatever it tastes more like or what you think it serves your customers more.
And most breweries put the alcohol content on the side of the package as well,
right,
and advertise that.
So. If you really care, you can check for yourself. That's why it bothers me to see a double IPA that's, like Chad said, like 6.2%. What are we doing, guys?
I do say one thing is like, it's really nice when you're in a tap room though, and they have all these things. And like, of course they know what they're doing. They're trying to get you to buy the beer, but they're also like giving a broad enough category to interest people or, hey, pick the style you want. But then you have the staff who's, if you want to nerd out and go deeper, they should know it, and then they talk to the brewer and, oh yeah, actually I did start this out as a pale ale, but now it's a session IPA and here's why. And you can go deep. That's cool. That's the fun of it. Like, it's like, you want to know more. There's always more. Just pull back the layers. But at the top level, you got to be careful with those categories. It comes down to, it can confuse or it can, make people happy to, if they're getting what they want.
For sure.
So,
and as brewers, people who work in the craft beer industry, we want to be inclusive and we want to bring people in. We don't want to scare them off with weird stuff. I'm like,
well, some breweries do. There's some scary breweries out there. Like there's some very metal focused, which I think is cool. Draws me in, but it scares some people away.
Yeah. The last time you guys were back in the States, you brought me back a bunch of beers. Some of them were from True.
Oh yeah, True's cool.
And the marketing, it's all like heavy metal. The beers were amazing.
Yeah.
So good. And that was the thing. It was like other than the actual label design, I don't know anything about the marketing or the branding or anything. I just tried the beers.
It's not just marketing. Like they're very metal. Like you walk in and it is metal turned all the way up, super dark, like very on point. And then their beers are also amazing. So what you is like this mix, like you find people that are going there because they want this awesome craft beer and then getting exposed to like a cool metal bar. And then you have people that love going to metal bars and they're like, now they're drinking good craft beer. So it's kind of cool to see that crossover.
Yeah.
Chad, are there any breweries back in the States that are like doing wild shit with styles that caught your eye last time you were back home?
Actually, it's funny though, because I was thinking about there's that brewery Martin House, but it's a huge thing in Texas. Like they want German style beers, traditional. And then there's Martin House, which is like in Fort Worth. They lean into the most like ridiculous. They got criticized in the beginning because they were like, let's play around with styles. And they purposely said, fuck the rules. And they put bubble gum in beer. They're doing all this crazy stuff. And people started being like, you take yourself seriously. They're actually really good brewers. So Martin House was like one of the ones I found in Texas that was doing something wildly different. I mean, and at first, because people criticized them, said, oh, these guys are just a bunch of weirdos. How dare they do this with our beer styles? How dare they, fuck with the Reinheitsgebot. And Reinheitsgebot. But then they just leaned into it. They're like, hey, we're good brewers. And they make great classic style beer too. But they leaned into it more. They said, how ridiculous can we get? And they just went, even their marketing on Facebook or Instagram is ridiculous. They're like, because people kept criticizing them, like, where do you get your naming conventions from? What's your styles? And they're like, oh, we just randomly watch Adam Sandler movies and just randomly pick names from it. Like, that was their one today. I was like, that's great. And they're making people laugh and having a great time. And they're making some really phenomenal beer,
Yeah.
So
what was the one you brought back for the Pickle?
Oh yeah, the Pickle. They have a Pickle Goza, which is really good.
That was fantastic.
It's really good. Yeah, they've had some misses. I mean, I tried something that was like actually the dead of one that I liked a lot was a blue coconut cream ale, which was sour. Oh, so good.
That sounds
Did we try
awesome.
that together? No,
I don't think we tried that.
Oh man, it was one of my favorites. But they've had a couple that I was like, yeah, okay. I heard the buffalo sauce flavor one was not great.
Right, but anybody that's pushing boundaries and doing wild experimental shit, it's not all going to work.
Yeah, exactly. That's part of the fun.
I don't know if anybody has a 100% success rate on every beer that they've had to come out of their brewery. Except for MixTape drinks.
I was about to say, except for Pastor Street. No mistakes, not one.
That's awesome.
And it's cool that they're themselves. I think that's the biggest thing with craft breweries. Like whether it's styles or names or product, whatever, do what you love doing and share that. And you're going to find people who dig it,
Yeah, be true to yourself.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, so I was in Texas mostly, which is after coming from California, I'm partial, West Coast style IPAs, everything else, Russian River, Lagunitas, blah, blah, blah. And then I went to Texas. All the breweries are very German focused. We're a German style brew house with your traditional German beers. They don't mean Gozas or Berliner Weiss. They mean they're talking about not even interesting stuff, just basically German basic beers like lagers and everything else. So I'm like, and Kolsch you might find once in a while, but most of it's pretty by the book. And I was like, I find that boring and not interesting.
Going back to the naming too, I was visiting a family back in the United States, and I went to the store to pick up some drinks, and came back. I was like, "Oh, Bethany, I got some ranch water. You want some ranch water?" And she's looking at me like I'm just crazy, and she's thinking ranch dressing.
Yeah.
Because it's a ranch flavored beer. And did I pick that up? That you said they had a ranch flavored beer?
They did. They did a ranch, blue cheese, and buffalo sauce, and they purposely did it. They're like, no, and I heard the ranch one was good, but not ranch water, which is a cocktail basically.
Yeah, but in the naming of it, she was thinking what?
This sounds
ranch
terrible, but
water? That sounds not so delicious.
As a ranch dressing addict, I would definitely drink that, even if it was just a bucket of ranch. It's disgusting. I may or may not have done that with the Hidden Valley Ranch's bottle back in the day. Just
tell me you're American without telling me.
I know, right?
But ranch water is delicious.
It is. The one that's not with ranch dressing.
The cocktail. Chad, have you heard of it?
Have I ever told you about ranch water? Well, let me tell you. Insider joke.
Yeah, sorry to our listeners. Chad came back from Texas, and all he would talk about is ranch water all the time.
All day, every day.
To the point where we had to start telling him, we know, you told us 18 times already.
It's tequila, soda water, Topo Chico preferably, lime juice, and salted rim.
Nobody asked.
See?
So one of the questions I did have prepared that I really wanted to ask both of you guys, is there a beer style that you really, really love to make that's not your favorite to drink?
Hefeweizen.
Sorry, you like making Hefeweizens, but it's not your favorite style of drink. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Okay,
so this is what I'm curious about is, what is it about the brewing process of making Hefeweizen that makes it an interesting beer for you to make?
The yeast.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an interesting style of yeast, and you have to get this bold flavor out of the yeast. So the pitching rates and the temperatures are very important, and slight adjustments to that can change the flavor profile of it. quite a bit, and I really like the the biochemistry side and the yeast side of it. So it's fun for me thinking about designing a recipe for that to like optimize some of the different levels of flavor. And then it's also like fun to think about how to keep that consistent. So I like from a technical standpoint, the process of thinking about that style of beer, but I really don't like the flavor of it.
I actually agree with you on that one too. I've never made a Hefeweizen yet because it does seem complicated and I'm lazy. But like, it's like, it is an interesting style, but it also has really good aromas when you're like, I like brewing in general. I enjoy the smells. I love like when you're, it's like cooking. It just smells so good. Sometimes when you get done cooking, you just don't want to eat the food. So it sounds like brewing sometimes. I'm like, man, this is fun. But I'm just, at the end of it, you're like, yeah, whatever. I just kind of pitch these and go home. I'm tired. Like Hefeweizen is like the last thing I want to do, 6 hours of brewing. You're just like, oh, I'm so tired of cleaning and cooking and ugh.
So Chad, maybe I can ask you the opposite question. Is there a beer style that you love to drink that you're like, that's a real son of a bitch to fucking make?
I mean, I'm less experienced than Alex for sure in brewing, but like, I don't know. No, I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, I mean, yeah. I mean, I want to make sours, and for some reason, I've only dabbled because I'm really nervous about it.
Okay.
So you can screw them up really bad quickly. And I love them so much, but I feel like I don't know, like still terrified of making a proper mixed culture sour. I haven't done it yet because I'm just like, I just think I'm going to screw up everything. And I'm just like terrified.
Sounds like a perfect idea for the first collaboration between Pasteur Street and MixTape.
I mean, that's one of my favorite styles of beer in the world, but I feel like it's like, there's the like different levels of brewers. I was like, oh, the guys can perfect a mixed culture sour or whatever, or a wild fermentation or a spontaneous fermentation sour. I'm like, yeah, those guys are dope. And they're like, oh, well, hats off,
Yeah.
So,
I don't want to get ahead of my skis and like talk about mixed culture or wild ferment because obviously it's beyond me. I've had them. They're fucking awesome.
I think we should name the beer. We tried really hard not to mess this up.
Alex thinks the name of the beer should be "We tried really hard not to mess this up." Mixed culture sour ale.
I like it. I love that. I love really ridiculously long names for beers. They're like, why did they name this beer? Like that'd be a great
I do too sometimes.
name.
Sometimes it's a little like so for us. Obviously, like our beers are named after the active ingredient in the style. Like it, and it's not the funnest. Like that's one thing that I sometimes. But then it would be off brand for us to come out with a Godwater craft lager. What was the Dumb and Dumber one that you had the can of?
Oh yeah, look, our pets' heads are falling off.
What kind of fucking name is that for a beer? But also,
I love it.
That's an amazing.
I love it. Again, that's Martin House. They're like, what style of beer? Like, oh, I guess it's a double IPA. Well, why did you call it that? Man, we were having this conversation in the brewery one day, and that was what we called it.
Dumb and the funniest things in the history of movies.
Oh, so good. But naming conventions for beers, like that's the thing too. Is like I've seen a lot of breweries like pale ales, IPAs, because hey, I want to just tell my customers what it is.
Yeah.
And then someone like me who's like, I'm just gonna call it whatever, peaches and cream, and no peaches and no cream.
Yeah,
which really pisses people off.
How do you get started on that process? Like you've got the beer, and then you're like, what am I going to name this? Or does it start with like a name? Is it like name before you get going on the recipe, or is it a recipe and then a name?
MixTape, the rule is it has to do something with music, and that can be as broad as it can be anything. I don't care. Music is so varied. Like you do whatever you want. That's the only rule. That's the only like brand guideline. I'm like, as long as it has something to do with music, convince me, Especially now the company's starting to have a few new people coming on, James and Sean, and they're like, okay, I know this is going to take its life of its own. And I'm like, great, as long as we just stick to has to have something to do with music. But that's pretty wild. So usually I start off, I write the recipe and I'm like, okay, I'm going to call it this. I've been listening. Usually I'd be listening to a song like, this is perfect, Or if I'm going to make a giant stout that I want to make someday, it's going to be like a crazy metal name, of course, big black imperial stout. But then honestly, like what usually happens is when I take that first sip and I'll be like, oh, no, that name was completely wrong. I know what this needs to be.
No, I think that's really cool that like you would name the beer after like a song that you were listening to when you were like writing the recipe. There was a distillery in Colorado that like every bottle would have like, like a handwritten thing on it. And it would be like the song that the bottling crew was listening to when it came out. I was like, that's awesome.
I figured maybe it's the same brewery. There's one brewery that actually plays music to their beer because it's like a living thing like plants. Like, so that it actually they believe it makes the beer better. And they actually play like one of them actually wraps like speakers around the fermenter. I was reading about this and I was like, I think that's actually one of the inspirations back in the day. I was like, oh, I know what I'm doing with my brewery. It's all about music, And,
sounds like some fucking hippie bullshit.
Absolutely. Or some, super stoners. Yeah. I mean, who knows? Like they say plants get way happier when you sing to them. So I don't sing to my beer. Just to be clear. I sing with my beer.
Chad, can you hear your beer?
No.
So my next question, I think, is a bit of a leading question for all three of us to talk about a certain style of beer that we all love. But is there any styles of beer that you think is underrepresented or underappreciated in the current Vietnamese craft beer market?
I mean, obviously sours.
Yes.
But it's hard to... It's a niche of a niche of a niche. It's
Hashtag
hard.
make more sour beers.
If they sold. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, yeah, stay authentic yourself, but also, nobody's going to drink your double sour, crazy pickle juice beer yet. Maybe in 5 years once you've convinced enough drinkers, but,
Yeah, I would definitely agree with sours. And then I also think that lagers, actually. And I think it's because mainstream beer has been so popular for so long that when craft breweries are doing lagers, like there isn't enough flavor differentiation to really, maybe justify paying this higher price point or something along those lines. But I know like in the United States, like lagers weren't like super popular in craft beer for a while, but then they really came back in a strong way when there's like, brewers love making them because they're difficult. And then like people were really appreciating like the nuance and like the subtle different flavors of these styles. So I think that, definitely like sours would be the first thing that pops into my mind. And then maybe second would be like lager.
It's funny because the next big mixtape production beer will be a lager, which is something I said I would never be really interested in doing. But it's that I'm like, I really want a specific style of lager. I'm not a big lager fan, but I'm like, there's a thing I want. And that's the next beer I'm working on, like with James and Sean, is like this beer. I won't say too much more about it because like still in development on it, but it's nothing secret. It's just like I want to get it right. I would like something that's like, not I don't want a boring Heineken or whatever, because like those guys are in some ways they're masters of what they do. It's perfect. It's always consistent, and not a big fan, but like having had some really awesome craft lagers or pilsners, they're full of flavor and bready, and I would like to have that.
That's awesome. You're filling the gap.
Well, actually all the beers I've ever made are beers that I didn't necessarily want to make. They're all like challenging myself. Like they're not some things I was like, okay, I'm gonna challenge this, So,
no, that's really interesting. Yeah. Like why do you think that is something that helps you get inspiration, like on making some awesome, like
challenge. I like challenges. And like the stout Molly, like I light stouts are not, I like big stouts, but I love Guinness, but everything else I'm like, it's light stout. Generally I'm just, it's okay. I'll enjoy them, but it's not. So I was like, can I make a full flavored stout, super light, the lowest ABV I can possibly think of? And I was like, I just sat there for days trying to work that recipe out. And it was like the most complex beer I've ever made, like eight malts. Like, it's like, why am I doing this? For this tiny little beer, but it's like challenge,
So instead of being true to yourself.
No, but as me though, it's like challenging myself is part of who I am. And I like trying, new things. So yeah. Tried to catch me up there. I saw it coming. I was like, fuck this.
Gonna lead him right down the path to this gotcha question.
Yeah, you've never done that to me ever.
Chad, it's the only reason I wanted to have you on the podcast, so that we get you on record contradicting yourself.
Yeah, it happens a lot, I'm not gonna lie. I get too excited too easily.
No, I think that's really cool. And like the challenge I think comes through maybe to beer fans as well. Kind of like challenging, like, hey, this is low alcohol, but it can also have this much flavor. I think it comes full circle in that respect. And it's an awesome beer.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks.
So to your point, Alex, about the lagers, I think one of the things I've seen here that's maybe tripped a few breweries up is like trying to go on what's popular in the States right now. Whereas like this is its own craft beer community, and like there are steps involved. So like you can't just skip major steps and expect, sours and lagers to be popular now here just because they're popular in the States. Because obviously craft beer started so much earlier back there. There was so many more iterations and different styles, and just, it's like it's a fucking ladder or a staircase, whatever. Like you got to build it up from the foundation. You can't just like, oh, they like IPAs, and hey, look at these fucking wild fermented sours, and like, I want more wild fermented sours. I fucking love them.
Yeah.
But I agree with what both of you guys are saying. I think lagers and sours will be popular here eventually. I just think, and we should keep pushing the envelope and like trying to normalize sour beers. Yeah. Absolutely. That's the reason I asked the question. I want to talk about sour beers. I love them. I wish more people were making them, and I wish they were more widely available, but also I understand that they're not going to be until they're more popular.
Once the craft beer segment grows overall, you'll have more of a niche that you can slice of that pie.
Exactly.
Like, don't stop making the dragon fruit goza, please. Ever. Even if it stops selling completely, I'll be the one guy I'll be like, give me a keg. Like, keep it going.
It's a great beer.
It is. And it needs the beer because eventually it'll get traction. I mean, sours will gain traction.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I've thought about that quite a bit, you know, and I'll look back to like what styles were like the first popular craft beer styles in the United States, and then what was popular after that, you know. But now hearing you say it, I'm like, do steps matter? I'm actually questioning that. Like, should every place that, you know, starts getting into craft beer go through those same steps, or could you skip a few? And I was thinking about the way that I personally like to design recipes, and it's just by listening to you know, guests and like our team and like what sort of flavors, you know, and that's, you know, where I try and get the ideas, because a lot of times I'm like, I want it to taste like this, or they'll say like, I think we should do a cider, and I'm like, we're not gonna do a cider, but why do you like that flavor? Maybe that's something we can get into a beer.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree fundamentally that steps don't matter, and that if we can skip a few, I don't think we need to have a brown ale phase in Saigon to legitimize what we're doing here in craft beer.
Good brown ale is awesome, but yeah.
It's a great question, though. I hadn't thought about it in that way until you asked it.
Yeah, no, I do think that some breweries here can get ahead of themselves a little bit, us included, with some of these styles that, you know, maybe the public's just not ready for yet, or isn't really asking for. Like, that's the other thing. To your point, like, talking to our team, talking to our clients, customers, talking to the guests at our tap room. Like, what do you guys want to have? What do you want to try next? Which styles of ours do you like? Which ones do you like more of in a slightly different way? Yeah, like, we don't need to hit all the brown ale and then a porter and then it's like, no, let's talk to people and see what they want and give it to them. And then also, like you said, you know, we're not going to do a cider, but maybe we can give you something that would satisfy the cravings that you're having for a cider in a beer.
Yeah, and it's not like anybody's gonna be like, hey, stop what you're doing. We have like 3 more years before we get to New England IPA.
That's it too, though. It's like, I remember when I started in Thailand and we brought IPAs into Thailand. I was like, you guys should have started with a craft lager. I said, no, we shouldn't have. I'm like, well, that's what people know, and that's what they want to drink. I'm like, that's what they know they want to drink because they haven't tried this yet. So there's a bit of that. You got to be like, you got to be the music makers. You know, you got to be able to be like, you just haven't tried this yet. Put it in your hands, taste it. Maybe sours will be the first thing in some country that's just finding craft beer. Like, that's their favorite style. It doesn't have to follow the path of, you know, lagers, pale ales, blah, 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 all the way up to sours. It can just jump right in, you know.
Sure.
Who knows? But I mean, there is a palate thing too, you got to be careful with. But it's a fine line. I think listening to customers is always that fine line of like, they're just saying this because what they know. They actually haven't tried something that would challenge their perception of what they might love, you know?
Yeah, and you're working with Beer Vaughn. I think you mentioned that in the intro, right? And you guys, you know, sell beer in Thailand. Before you guys were doing that, was craft beer popular in Thailand, or?
We were the first craft IPA. We're the second craft beer distributor to arrive in most of Southeast Asia, I think is my understanding. But in Thailand specifically, we're within a day of being the first craft beer importers. And then, yeah, you know, you try to bring in styles like, everyone's going to be, we thought same thing. We're going to start with ambers, we're going to start with brown ales, easy drinking. People just jumped right into IPAs pretty much. In between, they were coming from Hoegaarden. Hoegaarden was like a massive thing there. I think it's why the reason we had success, because they were coming in with this beer that people paid a lot for. It was a new style of beer they didn't know they liked before. You know, big old wheat German beer. Okay, awesome. Then we had Chainbreaker from Deschutes, and that was the gateway. It's right in between an IPA and a wheat, and everyone's just like, I love this, but also with this other thing. And then IPAs just took off. So,
do you think it's similar in Vietnam?
It's different because you guys led the charge of actually brewing local craft beer and doing like pale ales and IPAs and different styles. And like, I think it's a different game here a little bit for sure. I still haven't figured it out.
I mean, yeah. I mean, like importing versus brewing, but I mean, just in style preference.
Yeah. I mean, I still think IPAs. I mean, at the end of the day, it's different enough to make it warrant that price tag. You know, and it's not. You would say I don't like bitter. I'm like, yeah, but it's not bitter. It's hoppy. You know, I always try to learn the word for bitter in every language, in every country, because I'm like, when I'm doing a tasting, I'm like, not bitter, not calm in Thailand. No, that's not right. It's hoppy. Like, this is a new thing. Just you'll get used to it. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll hate it forever. But most of the drinkers will end up liking it a bit more.
Yeah. So our passion fruit wheat, you know, it's sour from the fruit.
Yeah.
But whenever a Vietnamese person says sour to me, I'm like, no, it's tart.
Yes. Yeah, because those words aren't necessarily good words for taste. Sour, bitter, those things like
no, exactly. Yeah.
like-
Well, there are a lot of people having negative words.
but those flavors are in all the food and all. A lot of drinks have it, and they love it. They don't usually use those words for
It's
it.
a perception thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, I think I mean, I don't know. You guys have more data than I do for sure on what people prefer. But I think IPAs are still pretty wild. You know,
Yeah.
Because I think it's something when you think craft, they don't want to pay triple, quadruple the price for another lager that tastes like Heineken.
Yeah, 100%.
It's
So
not
we did some market research with
Yeah.
some like focus groups, all Vietnamese people who identified as craft beer drinkers, and the first thing they did was feedback on just literally pouring a beer in a glass and looking at the glass before tasting it, before smelling it,
That's
just
cool.
looking at it.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were like, "Oh, those yellow ones, those aren't even craft beer." Like if it didn't have a darker color, they're like, "That's not craft. That's a local beer. It's a lager."
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to waste my time with that. No, but these are really awesome beers.
Right.
It's not craft.
But yeah, no,
Craft
a lot of people
as a flavor profile. Or is it like a perception? Well, I get that too. Like, I don't like craft beer. What do you mean? Oh, it's too hoppy. Okay, see, there's a lot more to that story.
No, and yeah, so much about that is building context and educating people, and like anybody who's like, I used to get it back in Toronto, worked at this brew pub, and I'd overhear people who thought they were like the experts of the group. They're all bringing the people to the tap room for the first time. And like, yeah, I only like ales. It's like, that's a dumb thing to say, because like lagers can be so like a Doppelbock and a Heineken. How can you even say that they're the same style of beer? They're both lagers, but like they're so wildly different. Like to say that, oh, I hate lagers, it's like, you're dumb. Like you just haven't found a lager that you like yet. Like, and I shouldn't say dumb, just not sophisticated enough to know what. But like, I don't know. I literally had a guy I overheard. He was talking about our stock ale, which is a nice light ale. He's like, yeah, it's a nice light ale. It's kind of like a lager. Just like, what the fuck does that even mean? It's wrong of me to criticize people for saying that, like, to say that they're stupid for not like saying I don't like lagers, because obviously lager is a style that's like so heavily defined by light local lagers. Like it's just so much of the overall consumption that I can understand why a casual beer drinker would be like, fuck lagers, I don't like them. Like they're trying to plant their flag in the sand that they're real drinkers, real ale, all that. I
do feel triggered though. I remember one time on Facebook I said something like that, joking. I was like, I don't like lagers. Like, Chad, shut up. Like, oh shit, was it me you're talking about now? Damn it.
I honestly don't remember seeing you say that, but it sounds like it might be right.
Oh, it might have been you, dummy. Did you call me dummy?
I would never.
To me, that seems like what we were talking about earlier. It gains popularity, then it diversifies, and then you've got all these different categories as lager. But I'm not sure if this is correct, but probably it started with like this one thing was lager, and then like, oh, well, this is different. Now you got dark lagers, and you got different types of dark lagers. And the same thing with IPA. You've got this thing. It's okay. This is an IPA, and now we're doing all these things that actually taste pretty different and have like a lot of different qualities. So let's start building more categories with an IPA, and like they're even kind of like tiered at this point, into like different genres of IPA that have like subgenres within that.
And this is why it relates back to music. You have rock, you have shoegaze, you have post new wave, grungecore. I mean, there's who knows whatever styles. Like everyone keeps redefining it, and it's fun, but it's like, it's also the best part about the freedom of like creativity is like keep going. I mean, this thing's not going to stop. Craft beer, just the amount of yeast we find every year is like, holy crap! Like engineering new yeast, like it's going to continue to change and evolve, and who knows? It's cool.
Let's make some new beer styles.
Yeah.
That is how styles are created. I remember like one of the first years, it was like there was like a herb and spice category, and then for the first time they were like, okay, pumpkin beers will be a category, and then for the first time chocolate beers will be a category. And it used to all just, and this is like during the time that I've been brewing beer, so like pretty recently, and now it just seems standard. Like, pumpkin beer is like a category of beer, or like chocolate beers is a category, but it wasn't like
it's such a category
a very short time ago.
That people make memes and make fun of it. That's how it's become so common.
Yeah, I mean, so that like in 1980, grunge music didn't exist.
Exactly.
Like it's a style of a subgenre of rock that came out because enough bands from this area and other areas like were similar enough. It was like, oh, we need a new word for these guys. This is new, and like this is not hair metal. This is not rock. it's not exactly punk, but it's like kind of punk.
Exactly.
Grunge.
They look really grungy. Look at their dirty shirts and flannel. Like their beat up Converse
flannel shirts and long hair. These grungy.
yeah. That's probably how I started. I get to see like Casey Kaser's like, oh, the grungy looking motherfuckers. Calling it grunge. Just own it. Just bite into it. Like, yes, that's us.
Can you believe these assholes made their IPA 9% alcohol?
Yeah. We're called double.
It's not an IPA. It's too big.
New England IPAs.
It's almost like twice as much.
Hazies. I mean, those were criticized. I remember being like, oh, those are going to be terrible. And then like, love them. You know, that was like really good ones. And that's super recent too. And it's become like one of the leading styles around ever. Now it's criticized by every brewer. I remember people making fun of it for days. Like I've heard brewers say, I'll never make that. Like next time I come back, I'm like, are 80% of your beers now hazies? I make them right. Oh, right. Cool.
So when it came out, you didn't believe in it.
I did not.
And you were like, this is going to be something that is temporary, and then it just goes away. It's a fad. But it didn't go away.
And I believe brute IPAs were here to stay.
So
I thought that was going to be a category.
But do you still feel the same way? Do you still feel like they're going to go away? Or do you think it's like so popular that it's just kind of there for good?
Yeah. I mean, it's history's written now. I think it's like it's there. It's a part of the landscape, you know, which is awesome. It just keeps growing. It's my favorite thing about craft beer. It's like I always tell people when I do a beer tasting or a beer dinner or anything, and watch all these people say they don't like beer, they do love beer. All these different opinions. And I'm like, yeah, but when you came into here, you said you don't like beer. And they're like, yeah. And then you do the vote of like, which one's your favorite beer? And every hand goes up for different beers. I'm like, that's the beauty of craft beer. This huge variety of flavor you weren't privy to before. And it's beautiful.
Our old distributor in Hong Kong, awesome dudes. But they're wine distributors mostly. They'd one craft beer before us. And they came in, took us on. And the guy, by his own admission, knew next to nothing about craft beer when he started working with us. And then a year later, I'm going to Hong Kong to visit him, and I'm like on sales calls with him, and he's talking like he's the expert of craft beer. like he's like picking apart other people's beers and just like, Chad,
it's funny.
Come on, man.
It's always one of my favorite things to hear, especially being here in Vietnam, where there's a lot of people who have never had craft beer before. It's still very early, and you get people come in and they'll taste it and be like, "This isn't beer." Like I like it, but this isn't beer. This is something different.
Yeah. People ask why, like. Because I never wanted to do sales in my life. I thought I'm horrible at sales. But whenever I would talk about craft beer, people were like, why aren't you working in beer? I was like, oh, I mean, I'd like to make it, but I would hate sales. I don't like salespeople. I don't like selling. It's not my thing. Like, but every time you talk craft beer, you're so passionate. I'm like, yeah, but I don't even like beer. Like, well, you like craft beer. I'm like, yes, but like that's why like to this day I still get super excited. Like hearing us talk. I still get super excited about it. It's like because it blew my mind at the time. Like I was like, whoa, it opened up my eyes, all these different flavors I couldn't even believe I didn't get to experience before. And that for so long, the world was so boring with it. Like, whoa, we were missing out on all these awesome experiences, you know? And I don't know, I still get super excited about it.
Right. So that's I think the first IPA I had was probably at the brew pub I worked at in Mill Street in Toronto, Ontario. And it was a pretty bitter IPA. It was called Tank House IPA. Like they do more kind of hazy stuff, like juicy hoppy now, but like at the time, the Tank House IPA was super bitter, but I liked it. You know, like I got into it. And then there was a stock ale as well, which I mentioned earlier. It's like the lighter, fruitier one. And I always used to tell my customers when they came in, like, oh yeah, stock ale is great for like when you first wake up in the morning, you want something light and easy drinking. And the Tank House is like, after a hard day's work, I've earned this beer. It's bitter. It's awesome. Yeah. So yeah, like.
Did you say when you first wake up, Mischa?
That's the joke, Chad. Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure I heard that.
Got them every time. I did have one other question I did want to ask both you guys specifically as brewers. What's the difference between sitting and drinking a beer that you've made and sitting and drinking a beer that someone else has made? Like, are you thinking different things? Like, are you just inside your own head, like dissecting the results of the beer that you made, whereas with someone else's beer, you can just casually enjoy it? Or it's just, for you, like, beer's beer?
It's just beer.
Okay. I feel like Chad's answer is going to be very different.
It's going to be 5 hours long. It's going to go different directions. We're not going to get an answer. No, when my own beer, I get really anxious every time I open a can. Honestly, every single one. I'm just maybe not been doing it long enough to where I still get anxiety. Every time I see someone drink my beer, I don't care, but I'm also like anxiously watching every muscle in their face. Like, are they enjoying it or not? They're probably not enjoying it. Oh, fuck, that batch. I remember I brewed it. The temperature got off for a minute or something. Who knows? I start overthinking it. Like, I don't enjoy it. I've gotten more confidence. Time goes on, you just whatever, relax more and more and more. But in the beginning, I was just like shaky hand and like, you know, like to this day, though, every time I drink any of my beers, I'm like, damn it, I messed that up. And people always stop me, Chad, just shut up about your own, because then you're going to criticize it. Just
I told you that. You're definitely overcritical of your own beers. You make really good beers, man.
Thanks, man. But I mean, like, you know, you can always, from batch to batch, I'm like, oh, I should have fixed that. That's not right. Like, why is it like this, you know? But other people's beer I enjoy more.
Yeah.
You know?
So for me, it's with export. When I see our beers in other countries and like a friend is going or whatever, it's like sending your kids away to college.
Yeah.
You know, like you're super
How's it
proud
gonna be
that you.
handled?
But the further away they get, the more nervous you get. And every time I see like someone from Saigon going to Hong Kong or Malaysia or wherever, trying to pass their street beer, I'm like, how did it taste? Is it okay? How does it taste?
That kid did a lot of drugs. Okay, do not talk to him. It's not my fault. In fact, he might have been adopted. Fuck him.
So, Chad, on every podcast, we close off with a little fact or fiction. So I've prepared some statements about you. So these are statements about you or about the beer industry in general, and you just have to say fact or fiction for all of them. Okay, so Chad, fact or fiction? Beervana brought the first craft beers to Vietnam before the local craft beer boom started.
Actually, fact-ish. We didn't bring it. Someone flew to Thailand and brought it in. So Tim from Beercraft would fly in with pick ice coolers before it was.
Oh, Tim hand carried some beers.
Yeah,
so you think you started the? Okay.
I wouldn't start it. See, that's a lot of credit. Of course, no friggin' way. No one has credit.
Thanks, Chad. Fact or fiction? Brewers sometimes steal recipes from other brewers.
Fact, I guess. I mean, why not? I mean, a lot of breweries post their beers and say, brew this. So
yeah, that one seems difficult to prove. Unless like you've done it, and then you can say like fact. Oh, I mean, I steal recipes.
Yeah,
you know?
I hacked Alex's computer, and I'm constantly just stealing at this moment. Downloading.
That's a whole rabbit hole that we could go down. The idea of posting recipes on your website, because like I've known some brewers who are like really proprietary about every little thing, but then like when I'm at these brewers conferences and I'm with brewers who everyone really respects and looks up to, they're the most easygoing. Like they'll talk about any stuff. Like, you know, someone's like, oh, how did you get that and that? And it's like, oh, you know, this, like, they're not proprietary at all. They're like the most open, sharing, welcome, like just shooting the shit with other brewers and like being awesome dudes.
Yeah.
Like, hey, how did you do that? They're proud of what they did. They want to share
exactly. And I think sharing knowledge is key. Like, you don't talk to chefs like, oh, you can't know how. I mean, the best chefs in the world put their recipes online and go for it. Make it better than me. I want to eat it. Like, there's a brewery now in San Francisco called Bear Bottle, and they're doing like, they were my favorite brewery when I was back in the United States. And they literally put their complete brewing schedule on their can, like the temperature of fermentation, the time, everything down to the most minute detail. I'm like, that's super cool. I was like saving their labels. So I'm like, this beer is amazing. I want to make this beer. You know?
Yeah.
So the answer is like, did we steal it? No, but they said I can have it. Basically, they're go for it. You know,
steal like an artist.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it. Chad, fact or fiction? You have over 100 tattoos.
Fiction.
Okay.
Much less.
I don't know. I think I just made that up.
Cool. But I have a lot.
Fair. Fact or fiction? IPA is the coolest style of beer ever.
Fiction.
Anything you want to say about that, or we're good?
I think we said it.
Okay. Yeah. Which brings us to our final fact or fiction. The peaches and cream beer contains neither peaches nor cream.
That is fact. And I will add one thing to that. So we're making we're releasing a new product next week for MixTape. And it's a tea-based seltzer. It's a tea, green tea, lotus, and it's like, you know, some lemon and some sugar. It's trying to something really light. I'm really excited about it. It's called Partea. My daughter came up with that name, Partea. And the team of the day was like, Chad, does it actually have tea in it? I'm like, yes. They're like, okay, thank God. And I was like, why? Because like we're sick and tired of representing like MixTape beers that have California Sun as a big orange slice on the front. You removed the orange slice because you said the hops could carry the beer. And I was like, they're like, but we also have to tell people there's no orange. I'm like, and peaches and cream, no peaches and cream. I'm like, sorry. So like, does Partea actually have tea? And they drank it like, this is very subtle tea. I'm like, yes. Like, can we put a disclaimer on there? I'm like, no. So yes, no peaches, no cream.
And you have so many choices with the song.
I know.
Has it been decided yet?
What's that?
The song.
What, Partea? Oh yeah. Oh, I'm thinking like a party people in the house tonight. You know.
Jesus Christ, Chad.
I was thinking like
you're gonna hate it.
Party in the USA.
Or
you've got to fight for your right to party.
Party hard.
So if we release Partea Dark, we're gonna release a dark version because the team said we want, because it says green tea. I'm gonna call it Party Hard. And it's gonna have Andrew WK like with blood down his face on the front of the can.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Does the Molly have Molly in it?
What's Molly? Everything that someone once told me, Chad, like, you know, I generally like, okay, you're pretty clean in some ways. Like, I don't try not to offend usually, but like you have just the right amount of deviousness. So if you look at all of my cans and all the beers, it's Easter eggs. So Molly is going to be sold by the gram in the tap room.
I would say the peaches and cream marketing is not exactly subtle.
It's subtle. My daughter thinks it's a cute peach with cream on top. What are you talking about? 6.9% ABV? No Easter egg there at all.
Look it up.
I think that's fun though. It makes me feel like there's always that extra, like the styles. There's always a little more to the story. You know, like keep digging. You know.
Sure, Chad. Is there anything you want to plug? Anything you want to talk about before we get going?
No, thanks guys for having me on.
Thanks for coming on.
It's good times. Thanks for basically kicking off the craft beer thing in Vietnam, and so that I can be here to pass street you guys.
I just like to drink a lot of beer.
Yeah, I know. So do I. But
I'm just excited for this RT hard seltzer. It's amazing. It's spot on.
Is there anything that inspired that particular beverage?
I don't know. I feel there's a lot of things I've been trying to work on.
Sorry, I just wanted you to say ranch water.
Yeah, no, I mean that was party water. I had to redefine it a bit. So I don't know. I just don't want it to be boring. I want it to be something a little bit more flavor.
Love it.
Maybe that's what we could do. We could do ranch water, but it could just be like the dressing in water.
Can we just do that?
Yeah.
We need to take this offline before people steal our ideas.
Oh my God, everyone's got to steal our idea.
Alex, anything else? You good?
I'm good.
All right, so this has been Beer Stories. Thank you to our guest, Chad Mitchell. Thanks to our producer, Neil Mackay. Check out his podcast as well. Thanks to Lewis Wright for our theme music. Thanks, as always, to my co-host, Alex Violet. And thank you for listening.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're like me, you may use your laptop at places where you have to use public Wi-Fi. This opens you up to digital snoopers. It's a massive problem. It can be your internet service provider, or you know who, looking at what you do online, or a cyber criminal trying to steal your bank passwords or credit card info, or even a hacker at the next table trying to steal your sensitive data. These days, it is vital that you keep your data safe. NordVPN keeps all of these snoopers away. It makes your internet activity private, protects you from accessing dangerous websites that are phishing for your data, and lets you enjoy your favorite content securely, even while away from home. And it's easy to use, even I could use it. I've actually been using NordVPN for years now here in Vietnam, and I'm excited to be an affiliate partner with them. I've used NordVPN to watch Netflix, BBC, Disney Plus with ease. And I also know that my information and data are safe from prying eyes, whoever they may be. Join now and you'll get 68% off and 3 months free when you go to my link, nordvpn.com/SMB. Just again, for those hard of hearing, nordvpn.com/SMB. The link is also in the show notes. I know nobody checks them out, but go check that out and you can get the link from wherever you're listening to this podcast. As an affiliate partner, it also means that I will get a small commission when you sign up, but at no extra cost to you. So not only will you be getting a great deal through 7 Million Bikes, you get a great VPN and you'll be supporting 7 Million Bikes podcast. Stay safe online and enjoy the shows you love. Any questions, just let me know. You know how to get in touch with me. And thanks for listening to this show. Cheers.